Today we're going to look at doing some fractions and some decimals on your TI-84 calculator and see how it can be helpful. Okay. Now, your calculator has the ability to reduce, multiply, divide, whatever you want to do with fractions, and I find that extremely helpful if you know how to use it. Let's start with something simple. 6 divided by 9, right? Okay, if that is your fraction, 6 over 9, we can hit enter. It does convert it to a decimal, obviously, for us. But let's say that we want it to be in a reduced form. I can hit the math button and then hit frac, and it takes the answer that we had here and it turns it into a fraction. Even further, I can do 6 divided by 9, math, frac, and it will reduce it to its lowest terms here. Okay, so you got a few options. Because sometimes we wind up with decimals and then we want to convert them to fractions. Sometimes we don't start directly with fractions. Okay. Another thing you can do, if you use the alpha button and you hit the fraction setup here. Let's say we want to do 8/9 times, and we want to multiply it by another fraction. Okay. Another fraction, say 3/2. Okay. If we do that directly using the fractional setup, it's going to go ahead and give us it in a fractionalized term here in the most reduced form after solving it. So this is a good way to check yourself if you're doing a problem that's involving fractions and you want to check to make sure, one, that you got the answer right, and two, that you have the answer in lowest terms. Okay. All right, let's say that we were just given a decimal straight off the bat here, 0.458, and we needed to convert it to a fraction. We can use that frac button to do that as well. Okay. Now, sometimes they don't turn out to be the neatest fractions here, but it will indeed convert it into a fraction for you. Okay. All right. So now, the next thing we can do, okay, is we can also divide fractions. So if we set the fraction up with the fraction set up here, alpha x, which gives you the fraction or number over fraction here. So if I do 5/9, it'll actually divide it for you as well, divided by, okay, and we put the other fraction in here, and we will do 10 over 18. What we can see here is that's actually the same thing as 1, right? So 5/9 divided by 10/18 is the same thing as 1. Okay, it can do that for us. Just because you mess with fractions doesn't mean you're always going to wind up with a fraction. So we kind of know how to convert from fractions now. But let's say that, okay, we entered it in fraction form, right? So let's say we enter it in fraction form. So let's do another one. All right, 8 divided by 5 times 9. Oh, okay, let's try that. See what happens. I get 72 over 5. Okay, let's say that we don't want it in fractionalized terms now. Let's say we want it in decimal terms. And if I just keep hitting enter here, it keeps giving me as a fraction, but I need it as a decimal. We can use math decimal, which is your second option here, in order to convert that answer to a decimal. Okay, easy enough, right? Okay. Another thing that we can do, we know how to graph, right? So if I do 5/8 x plus 3, okay, let's say I graph this, okay, and I want to do second calc value x equals, or yeah, let's do this instead. Let's do second calc 0. Let's see if we can calculate this 0 right here. Okay. So if I go left bound up to 0, right bound up to 0, and then I guess the 0. This is the 0 it gives me. That x equals negative 4.8. Okay. Now let's say that I want that as a fraction, right? If I hit math frac, it's going to turn, oops, what did it do? x equals, if I go here and do math frac, it'll turn that into a decimal, okay? So, let's do it again. So we've got this function in, we're going to graph it, okay? Second calc 0, so we're calculating our 0 here, and it works for mins and maxes and stuff too. But we'll go ahead and calculate the 0 here, and I'll show you that it does it correctly. Okay, we find our x here. Our x is negative 4.8, okay? So if we quit, and then we do math frac, remember it was negative 4.8, okay? If you don't believe that that answer is correct, change it back to a decimal. You see the decimal is negative 4.8. Okay. You could as well do x math frac, and it's going to tell you, okay, if you want to take the x that you just found and convert it into a fraction, that's negative 24 over 5. Easy enough. So we can do graphical stuff, come up with a decimal, and find a way to convert it back in our normal screen over here to a fraction. Okay, that is possible. Okay. Not at all a problem there. Now you can't always put everything in as a fraction. You can do quite a few fractions with things, but there are things that won't be able to be converted into fractions. So keep that in mind. But this is a quick and simple way to reduce fractions if you're having trouble reducing fractions, to check your fractionalized answers if you're working through a problem, or if you're doing something graphical and you need a fractional answer to, say, enter into MyMathLab, you can convert those graphical answers also into fractions using your calculator. You just have to know how to use the math frac option. You can also convert them back to decimals. That's fairly simple as well too with that second option. If you have a fraction, you want to convert it to a decimal, easy to do right there. So, your calculator pretty much does whatever you want it to do with fractions. You just have to tell it what to do. And like I said, you can even do a bunch of these weird long divisions here with several different numbers dividing each other here and still be able to do math frac, and it'll turn that into a fraction as well. Okay, so take advantage of your calculator when allowed to help you with fractions. I know a lot of people struggle with fractions, but any fraction you have, as long as it's not involving a variable. If it's involving a variable, you can use a graphical function perhaps. But any fractions you have that are simple fraction, multiplication, divisions, additions, like I said, it works with additions as well. 5/6 plus 9/13. Okay. You hit enter on that, it's going to give you a decimal, but you can convert that right back into a fraction. Okay. It's going to work for you. It's going to give it to you in lowest terms, which is what we always want. Use your calculator as best you can when allowed to. Take advantage of what you got. You paid all that money for it. Might as well use it, right? So I hope this helps, and I will see y'all next time.